I rebuilt my son's gaming PC in this right here, the Zalman M2 Mini. And I know what you guys are thinking, but Brian, why? Well, let's rewind a bit and I'll explain just that.
What are you doing, guys? You good? Okay.
Yeah, I definitely went a little bit too far. Let's get back on track. All right, so sitting in my son's room right now. This is his PC right behind him. As you can kind of see, it's kind of faded out because of my bokeh, but we're having issues with it, and I started taking it apart. Now, originally I thought it was the 570 had failed. My son decided he wanted to turn off his PC or put it to sleep while it was still in game on Fortnite, and when he went to go reboot it, it wouldn't work. His PC wouldn't boot, and I thought the 570 had failed at first because it was giving me a GPU error. I went ahead through a test bench. 570 is working perfectly fine. Threw a 960 in here, and everything was working good, except now Windows won't let it update. So I can't get Windows to update, which really stinks because one of his favorite games, Roblox, can no longer update because it goes through the Microsoft Store. So I'm lost for words right now. I've spent hours and hours and hours trying to fix this computer, and at this point I'm just kind of done. I've spent probably 30, maybe even 35 hours trying to fix this computer at this point in time, and Microsoft is no help. Google is definitely no help either, and Bryce is super bummed that he can't play Roblox. He hasn't played it for like 2, maybe even 3 weeks at this point in time. So I've decided that I'm just gonna start over completely. Brand new build, and this time I'd like to use something a little bit smaller. Mainly because he doesn't have like the biggest desk, and it is a little bit shaky because I personally built it. And well, building a flat tabletop is extremely hard. Anyway, I'd like to reuse his i5-10400F because it's a absolutely dope CPU. But honestly, I don't have any mini ITX motherboards on the Intel side right now, and I don't feel like dropping another couple $100 on a new board. That said, I do actually have 2 mini ITX motherboards on the AMD side that I can use for this build. The first was actually recently removed from my workstation PC, which is the Asus B450-i ROG Strix, and the second is a board I just picked up a few weeks back, the MSI B550i Gaming Edge Max Wi-Fi. Now, either board will be more than sufficient, as I'll be using a Ryzen 5 3600 in his build, which is an absolutely incredible CPU with 6 cores, 12 threads, and a max single core boost clock of 4.2 gigahertz. But since I do run a Wi-Fi 6 network at home, and Wi-Fi 6 is a massive upgrade over Wi-Fi 5, I will be opting for the MSI B550i Gaming Edge Max Wi-Fi over the cheaper and more than serviceable B450-i ROG Strix from Asus. Either board would be more than serviceable in this kind of build, but since I have it available to me, I would rather give him that more fluid wireless connection. Now, to keep it cool and quiet, I'd like to use the Scythe Big Shuriken 3, which is pretty decent overall and will easily be able to manage the CPU's output even under heavy load. But unfortunately, it won't fit in the Zalman M2 Mini. That said, I'm going to stick with the AMD stock cooler for now, and if I end up needing to upgrade it down the line, I'll do so then. The only other changes I'll need to make for his new system are going to be the power supply as well as the graphics card. Power supply, of course, has to be SFX to fit into the Zalman M2 Mini, and so I'll be using the GM650 from EVGA, and then I'll also be throwing the RX 570 back into this build as it provides a lot more performance in comparison to the replacement GTX 960 that I threw in when he started having issues in the first place. At this point in time, I'm pretty sure the RX 570 is good to go, and I'm pretty sure that the issue arose because he did put his system to sleep while he was playing Fortnite. Well, he also doesn't have the most reliable PSU in his current system, so that could have led to the issues as well. Now, as for memory and storage, I'll be reusing both the 16 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB memory and 500 gigabyte Samsung 850 EVO currently in his system. The boot drive will be replaced with a 500 gigabyte inland premium M.2 to give him a little bit more storage on that front, but overall, there's not much changing here. So I now need to go ahead and tear down the rest of his old build, get his new system up and running. So let's go ahead and jump right to that, and you guys can enjoy this super sexy build montage. rebuilt my son's gaming PC in this right here, the Zalman M2 Mini. And I know what you're thinking, Brian, why would you do that? Well, let's rewind a bit. Just kidding. We already talked about that. Instead, let's go ahead and talk about performance of this thing before we dive into a couple really important notes I have about the actual build process. So this kind of system is gonna be perfect for esports titles. And so today, we're mostly going to focus on those type of benchmarks, starting with CSGO. In CSGO at 1080p high settings, the system was able to push an average frame rate of 215 frames and 1% low of 129 frames. This game ran smooth as can be, and I had no issues such as stuttering while gaming. The next title I tested was Fortnite at 1080p medium presets. In this, we saw an average frame rate of 147 frames with a 1% low of 81 frames. Again, smooth sailing while playing and no complaints here either. I then went ahead and tested a new title that has been very popular since launching a few weeks back, New World. Being that this might be a title some budget gamers are looking to get into, I found this to be a perfect addition to my benchmarking suite. At 1080p medium settings, this system was able to get a stable 61 average frames per second with a 1% low of 43 frames. Now this wasn't in heavily populated areas, so I do have fears that this could see a pretty big dip in massive PvP scenarios, but we did use medium settings, so the system does have a little bit of wiggle room if you want to drop the settings a little bit more. The last title I tested for the system was Valorant at 1080p high settings. In this title, we saw an impressive average frame rate of 304 frames and a 1% low of 240 frames. Obviously very playable with this type of system. And again, this system's gonna be really good for esports titles overall. Now, before you guys run off, I do have some pretty important notes for any of you guys who are interested in building in this case. So first of all, the GPU riser. The way that this case is designed puts the riser very close to the only exhaust fan in this entire case. At first, I thought this was a massive issue because I couldn't get the cable to tighten enough to prevent contact with the fan. But then, after a while of testing and messing around with it, I found out that if you install the GPU into the riser before you plug it into the motherboard, the issue basically disappears. Yes, this does make it a little bit tougher to plug the actual riser cable into the PCIe lane itself, but overall, it's not that big of a deal. And by doing this, it ensures that the PCIe riser cable is clear of the blades. The second issue is that the SSD tray is located on the bottom of the case. While in theory, it's a great idea to keep it here, I personally found the design a bit too tight. When removing the tray, it comes out pretty easily, but once you install an SSD or two into it, it's very, very hard to slide it back in. Not to mention, plugging in SATA power and data cables is also an absolute nightmare. If you decide to build in this case, I would highly suggest only using M.2 drives with it. And so that is my son's latest build in the Zalman M2 Mini. If you have any questions, comments, and any of that kind of stuff, drop them in the comments below. If you want some more inspiration, feel free to check out all these builds I've done right here. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you later.